Have Prince Harry and Meghan Markle lost a staunch ally in Princess Eugenie, as she apparently now is more throwing her support behind her cousin Prince William over their shared environmental concerns? That is the possibility that was raised in a couple of recent articles and social media posts regarding World Ocean Day. Are the York sisters finally, let's say, shifting so much of their support back to the crown because there may be a role for them in the future? This is, to me, if this is true, especially regarding their role in the future, super exciting because the monarchy desperately needs some young bloods. And I think Charles was way too swift in trying to cut the York sisters out in order to achieve his streamlined monarchy because unfortunately, his son does not have as much loyalty as basically the rest of Charles's family. And I think the royals desperately need some additional working members in addition to raising the profiles of those like Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, and of course, Princess Anne as well. We have so much going on in the royal sphere here, and I am so excited to maybe see this shift happening. So we are going to go into all of this. But if you haven't been to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany. You usually see my shining face here, but I am having internet issues. So we are recording this directly into the computer with the hopes of uploading it. So if you love this royal commentary and you're especially excited for my coverage of Trooping the Color, which will be on Saturday, I am here traveling in London to see it myself yet again. This will be my first normal trooping. So I've done Platinum Jubilee, I've done the coronation. So this will be my first sort of normal regular Trooping the Color. And so I am so excited to share all this with you guys. So if you guys want to hit that subscribe button, follow along. Hopefully, if the internet gets better, we shall have a live stream on Saturday after trooping, maybe even one on Friday, but it all depends on internet. So guys, thank you so much for your support and your interest because I am so excited to do this. And we do have some more royal news going on as well because it has been a busy week. I like to call this section the Crown Report. So we have Princess Catherine Amalia, who sadly fell off her horse recently and injured her upper arm to such an extent that she needed surgery. I very much feel for Amalia here. I also was bucked off a horse and broke my wrist and had to have surgery. So it was not fun. I imagine there's some hardware that she's having to deal with. Her mom, Queen Maxima, actually got the notice when she was actually at an event. You can actually see her looking at her phone and getting kind of concerned about something and then leaving the room to take the call about the injury. So Amalia is expected to be released from the hospital tomorrow. And so that is a good sign. So hopefully she'll get all the rehab she needs and hopefully she'll be back in the saddle soon. We also have Queen Mary and King Frederick in the Faroe Islands doing a tour with their youngest child, Princess Josephine. And so they were wearing some traditional dress, which was awesome. And so it looks like they had an absolutely fantastic time. Prince William has also unveiled a plan to restore Dartmoor, which is part of the Duchy of Cornwall, which he inherited as his dukedom after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. The Duchy of Cornwall has been in the possession of whoever the heir to the throne is for centuries at this point. And so this particular project will focus on coordinating public and private investment to restore the petlands and upcoming mosaic habitats in the South Devon area. And so Prince William, according to the BBC, said the vision was bold and ambitious and he hoped it would deliver for generations to come. So it's great to see William continuing to make an impact on the Duchy of Cornwall. King Charles had quite a busy day today. First, he attended the King's Foundation Awards, which had some serious star power added to it with Meryl Streep, Kate Winslet, and the soon-to-be Sir David Beckham. And then in the evening, His Majesty made his way over to Windsor Castle, where he hosted the King's Award for Enterprise reception with the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh also in attendance, with Princess Anne and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester as well. So on to this story. And I found this story is actually going to do something different. And we'll still probably do that piece at some point. But I was fascinated by this sort of change that we've have subtly seen. And I think the more and more interest in trying to utilize Beatrice and Eugenie as sort of augment members of the royal family, those who can be sort of pseudo-working royals in a way, much like you could argue Harry and Meghan wanted to, and then ultimately failed at. And this is very important because the monarchy, I hate to say it, it's very old in terms of the people who are actively working in it. Now, I know some people will not like that description, but I actually did the math, and the current working royals, I think the average age is in the 60s. And for many other royal families, King Frederick is not even in his 60s, he's in his mid 50s. And so I feel like throughout Europe, we have all this young blood, and then the Brits just seem very old in comparison. Now, this is not totally the case in Norway and Sweden and those sorts of places where the kings are getting up there in years, but when it comes to the Brits especially, they really need that young blood there. And I think Beatrice and Eugenie could definitely fill that void. And it sounds like when it comes to at least Eugenie, who many have suspected over the years of being a spy of Harry and Meghan and everything, is apparently really moving closer to her cousin William and away from Harry and Meghan. And palace sources told the Post, so this is the New York Post, that the sisters are well aware of the plans Prince William has in store for them. And William and Eugenie's strengthened friendship has become increasingly visible at various royal events. So we can think of this as Eugenie attending the garden party this year with William and Catherine. She was also at the garden party last year when William had all the cousins there. It was a wonderful event and way to connect them all together. And so the sisters, although they don't have an official role, can step in an unofficial capacity. And we also had the interesting thing of King Charles, for his King's Foundation, announced Eugenie as a mentor for its new 35 under 35 program. So again, it seems like they're really moving towards the sisters, which I think is fundamentally, completely and utterly a great thing to do. And in this entire process, Eugenie has drifted away from Harry and Meghan. And we've seen this sort of taking shape for a while. The last time, as far as I'm aware, we saw Eugenie with Harry and Meghan was, I think, maybe even the documentary series. And it was very brief there. So that was in 2022. And I think we saw them go to dinner with Eugenie and Jack in 2022, in like earlier 2022. So there has been a long period of time. We're talking a couple years now since Eugenie has as closely and publicly associated with her cousin. Obviously, this picture from the coronation doesn't really count because this was like an official event. They were seated together. They probably couldn't control that. So I would not take this picture too seriously as an indication of them having a close relationship. Now, I don't think it's necessarily bad that she has a relationship with him, but I think her loyalties, although I will say if she's always been smart, her loyalties should always reside with the crown because that's where the real power is. But according to a source that told The Sun at some point, Eugenie has been supportive of Harry and Meghan for years and was right there at the beginning of the relationship, and now it has soured. And I think I know sort of why this has happened. I mean, obviously I do, let's say, support the idea of anybody who wants to be close with a family member who's, let's say, challenging in order to help mend the fences. I think that's a good thing. I think Eugenie, though, throughout these several years, has seen sort of the tide turn. The problem with Harry and Meghan is that they don't have that likability factor, and she knows where her bread is buttered, and it's not with her cousin Harry. The thing is, Harry and Meghan have very limited power. Yes, Meghan Markle can get a big social media reaction, and really, she's shallow, so that makes her really happy. But the overall issue that I think Eugenie and many others in the British royal family have when it comes to Harry and Meghan is that they don't keep confidences. They're constantly making trouble for everyone in the family. And so it doesn't behoove anyone to actually really be friends with Harry and Meghan. It makes sense to very much keep them at a distance. And I think that's a good thing because Harry and Meghan, anybody who associates with them tends to get dragged into their toxicity. So the less you are in a relationship with that, the less you are entangled with them, the better off you are generally. Now, I will say, I know I hear people all the time going, oh, Eugenie doesn't like Catherine. She gives her mean looks or whatever. As far as I'm aware, because I've been watching royals a long time, and I know not everybody has, and I know a lot of people have come into this sphere since obviously the Harry and Meghan thing, but there was a period of time where it was alleged that Catherine wasn't being so nice to the York sisters. And there was an issue where Beatrice was going to show up to a party that Catherine didn't tell her was fancy dress and was a little humiliated and left. The only reason I mention this story is that relationships are complicated and all of these women have been interacting for 20 years now. So Are they perfect? No. Do they get along pretty well, I think now? Yes. Was everything perfect initially? No. Probably not. Were there sort of kerfluffles and everything? Probably yes. I think this is important to bring up because people tend to sanctify Catherine and William and hate on the York sisters when there are, I think, a lot more things at play here. But when it comes to the future of the monarchy, I think bringing the York sisters into the fold is a very, very good thing because the British monarchy desperately needs workers and young workers at that. Again, I follow royals all over Europe, and the British monarchy feels very old. And that's because many of its working members, or most of its working members, are a bit on the older part of the spectrum. Not, I mean, totally, because you have Catherine and William who are in their 40s, Edward and Sophie who are now in their 60s, but then you have the Gloucesters who are in their late 70s, Charles who's in his mid to late 70s, Anne who's 75. Everybody still loves Anne though. But the Duke of Kent is in his 90s, or maybe late 80s, but I think he's in his 90s now. You have Princess Alexandra of Kent, who's around the same age. And so you have this very much this older cadre, and you haven't brought in younger people to sort of kind of hold the tide. Because particularly in the British monarchy, because especially of Catherine's illness last year, we saw less of her and less of William. So everything fell on the older members. And I'm sorry to say, but the older members generally don't get as much press attention. They just generally don't. So the more I think you can bring youth in, I think it's a good thing. Now, don't go overboard. Don't go too much. Obviously, I think Eugenie and Beatrice are very happy in their private working roles. But if there's an opportunity for them to serve, I think Charles, it's in his best interest to let them serve because it'll be a long time until the Wales' kids are ready to go. And William had, I would argue, a very slow entry into working royal life. Very different than that of his continental counterparts in many ways. Like some of them have been doing royal engagements since they were toddlers and everything. William had a very, very long, like he wasn't really, I would say, like a true working royal, like full time until he was about in his 30s. And that's just not going to be an option for his kids. That's not going to be an option, especially if they don't allow Beatrice and Eugenie to come in and fill some of that stopgap. And then all the burden will fall on William's kids, and the William's kids will not get this slow entry that he did. I mean, I still don't think they will because of, Charles with his illness that he's dealing with and everything. I think there's a strong possibility that those kids will be called up much earlier than he did. They won't have the buffer William did with this huge aspect of working royals that were working during his younger years, being the heir to the heir and all these sorts of things. And they need somebody to come in and help. And I think Beatrice and Eugenie can be two great assets that the monarchy can utilize. Yes, I know other people talk about Zara and Mike. Unfortunately, they're really far down the line of succession, so they don't have royal titles either, so that makes it a little bit more challenging. Obviously, they can still do similar things that Eugenie and Beatrice have done in some ways. I know people have floated the idea of Lady Louise and James, but they're also way too far down the line of succession. It really does make sense to elevate Beatrice and Eugenie more if they were willing to do that. Now, of course, you had the question of Andrew, and I think that's really what's held them back is Andrew and their mom, to be quite honest, which is super unfortunate because as far as we can tell, the girls don't have quite the issues that their parents do, which is a good thing. I think it's a good thing. And so I think the sisters can be utilized in really, really awesome ways if given the chance. I think especially Beatrice really likes to serve. She has great respect for her grandmother and grandparents, and I think would love the opportunity to be a working royal and to have that history that she can bring and enjoy that time with her cousins. And I think Beatrice especially really wants the opportunity to have an impact on the monarchy the way she saw her grandparents do in some ways. So just being able to serve, representing her country, her heritage, her culture, her history in that unique way that royals can, I think would be very much of interest to Beatrice. And when you do have, and this is a difficult thing too, when you have Catherine, she's still in recovery a bit. We also don't know what type of cancer she has, what if there's a recurrence or something like that in the future. I think they're going to need the York sisters more than ever, to be honest. I think it was a mistake to streamline the monarchy to such an extent, and Charles never adjusted his plan after Harry and Meghan left. He never adjusted. He never considered the fact that Harry and Meghan might not want to do things. And it's time, I think, for not only Beatrice and Eugenie, but even Sophie to have a greater profile. She doesn't get covered quite as much, but if there is a way to get her more on people's radars, I think adjusting the fashion would help a bit, because I do the best and worst fashion looks of the week. And I'm going to work on that video next. And for the next one, I decided not to conclude Sophie or Crown Princess Victoria because they tend to be on the worst list every time. And it's not that Sophie's style and things she chooses aren't necessarily bad, but I think she could just use a little bit of help making them look even better. And I think that is the key, because the reality is, especially for royal women, is that fashion does matter. And it was interesting, I shared this with the members, but I was listening to the photographers talk on one of my recent trips, and they were mentioning that especially Queen Camilla, her pictures aren't selling quite as well. And Queen Elizabeth, because of the brightness of her looks, the uniqueness of her looks all the time, yes, it was a template, a coat, and there was a dress underneath and it was a colorful coat and a colorful hat, but people connected with that, and it made the engagements and the pictures more enticing. And so I think fashion is a huge part of being royal. And I think sometimes some ladies don't take it as seriously as they should, because the fashion really does zero in with people. They remember engagements based on the fashion. I know I do that sometimes. And so sometimes the more serious the women take the fashion, I think sometimes the better. I think Sophie could do with a little bit of help there. She chooses some good pieces, but putting them together a bit better. She can sometimes lean into the frumpy. So being able to avoid that, I think, is key. But the Brits have so many people they can rely on. There's so much, I think, good going on. And so this switch with Eugenie is just so exciting to see. And I had always anticipated this would happen because Harry and Meghan just don't have that much to offer. They just don't. They tend to drag everyone down with them, whereas I think Beatrice and Eugenie are looking into ways to be assets to the monarchy and not liabilities. And I think they've achieved that, and I think Charles should give them a chance, if they want it, to be more involved in the working royal family. We also had an article talking about how the sisters have like a private secretary they use to help coordinate their schedules and everything. And so the more they can do that, the more I think they can be pulled into the working system. I think it's the better for everyone. I think everybody wins here. I think everybody wins. And of course, the ones who lose the most are Harry and Meghan, because not only did they leave their family in the lurch, but they keep trying to throw shots at them on their way out. So I am so excited to see what the future might hold for Beatrice and Eugenie, and what the future might hold for Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh as well, and Prince Edward. There are so many great working members of the royal family. I think Princess Anne has shown that chasing the likability factor is not as good as just simply getting down and working. And I think the royals desperately need more of that, and any way they can do that to kind of offset the burden from some of the older members, I think would be absolutely fantastic. So guys, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall talk to you again soon. Bye.